Check one, two, three. Hey everybody, it's Michael Helms, also known as Michael the Sound Guy, and this is the Location Sound Podcast. You know, each episode we talk with location sound mixers, boom ops, and other industry pros about the various aspects of recording sound on location, whether it's for feature and independent films, TV commercials, interviews, any time where dialogue from actors is recorded. I started my career in the recording studios in New York City with some of the big artists back in the day, and later on projects for networks like HBO, Sci-Fi Channel, and the Cartoon Network. As time went by, I got out of the studio and began working in production sound. Whether you're a seasoned veteran or just starting out, thanks for joining us. All right, my guest today is a production sound mixer and audio post engineer based out of New York City. Please welcome Gene Kim.
Hey, nice to be here, Michael.
Thanks for being on the podcast. Now, Gene, we always like to start the show by asking, when you're mixing on set, what's in your audio kit? So tell us about your mics, your mixer, and power distribution, and everything in between.
Right. So the small bag is a 633, big bag is a 688. Power distro is Audio Roots with Inspired Energy bats. The wireless is all Zaxcom. So I run 8 channels of Zax, and then about 5 or 6 ERX for timecode boxes and scratch boxes. And the only real other kind of funky gear that I have is it's this thing called an RF Vue. It's a spectrum analyzer. So there was a period of time where we're running 12 wires, I'd say maybe 10 times a month. And so I just needed something that would, really help me visualize that in a more efficient way. It's a nice piece of tool. You put it on a tablet and it'll give you it'll analyze the RF spectrum and, pretty much up to 5 gigahertz. So it helps you see clearly where the interference and problem areas are going to be.
What kind of shotgun mics do you use?
So I have a Sennheiser MKH50, an 8060, a Neumann KM150, a CMIT, and I'm thinking about the Schoeps CMC 41. I like the CMIT a lot, but it's failed a couple times when it was humid. I think it sounds great, but it just, it worries me a little bit.
And what kind of lav mics do you like to use?
So I have a mix of, I mostly run with DPA 4063s, and then I have COS 11s and some B6s, but I generally stick with DPAs. I think they sound pretty nice.
In comparison, say, to the COS 11, what's the difference?
To my ears, they sound a little more open. They're a little more open. They sound a little brighter. There's a little more clarity to them, and it cuts really well with some boom mics if I get the position right. Yeah, they sound very nice.
I haven't had a chance to try them, so I was always wondering what we were hearing a little bit different. So
the new ones, the 6060, sound really nice. They're much hotter. Yeah, they have a kind of a more solid presence to my ears, but they sound terrific. They're also kind of expensive too, so hard to switch over at this point.
Isn't everything in audio expensive?
So true. It's a minimum of, you always walk out, it's a couple $1,000s. You're like, Jesus, what just happened?
I know. What kind of timecode boxes do you use?
I don't get a ton of call for timecode, so the ERX does pretty well for me. If I have to get something that's going to be more robust, I'll rent out some Betso boxes from friends. And those are pretty nice. I tried I think it's called the OneSync. That was actually a really nice system. They all sync through Bluetooth, and you can change the parameters on your phone. So I thought that was pretty nifty.
All right. You've worked on a ton of different kinds of projects. You've done some narrative work. You've done commercial work. So tell us a little bit about some of the projects you worked on recently.
Recently, there's been a couple of different projects. One is a podcast that's it's fairly new. So I'm used to doing it in the studio, but they wanted kind of a mobile rig in an office. So I was kind of picking the brains of people on the forums, testing out a couple mics, playing with some different setups. So that's one gig. There's another gig that's like live sketch comedy. That's definitely something new because I have to work with a front of the house mixer. The guys on the forums are just so nice. They're like, look, this is how, this would be a good workflow for you if you have to work with front of the house, and, you can let them deal with feedback, and, this is some gear that would be helpful. And then the rest of it is just, standard stuff we all do. Sit down interviews, some reality type stuff worked in there.
All right. You said sketch comedy. So what would be a kind of a typical setup for a sketch comedy type situation?
Yeah, so this show, they have 5 people on stage, and it's they're doing something with Google and SAP, where they take like a tech topic and they make it into sketch comedy, and then they have a game show portion of it where they get even more dynamic. And so they have a live band. So the duties are split up where I'm just supposed to record ISO tracks, send the wires to the front of the house mixer, and they kind of take care of the live end of it. We're working on getting a splitter. So basically we'll split all the wires. One set goes to him, one set goes to me. That's pretty much it. But the challenge has been the sketch comedy. They're so dynamic. They'll go from whispering to screaming. So we've had to work with possibly different types of lavs to cut down on feedback and getting a little more headroom on there. But so far it's been okay.
Now you're actually providing the wires for the actors, and then front of house is using that as well.
Correct. All right, we just split them from a splitter box.
I was looking at your demo, and you had some stuff, daily tips with Cardi B. What was that about?
So it was a shoe commercial. She was doing it with Steve Bannon, and the setup was she was going to go through 8 outfits, 8 pairs of shoes. She would basically just be Cardi B. She didn't have to memorize lines. She would just walk out and kind of do this impromptu, I don't even know what you call it, like, hey, I got these new shoes. This is what I think. And I didn't know who Cardi B was at the time. I knew nothing about her. I knew that she was a musician. So we walked in, a lot of surprising things happened. She's a very dynamic person. And she, at one point in one of her outfits, she had her shirt off. And yeah, just all there. And I was surrounded by the entourage, and I said, hey, look, everyone saw that, didn't do anything. She took the shirt off, and they're like, yeah, blah, blah. Didn't you know she used to be a stripper? She's pretty comfortable with, her body. I was like, oh, okay, well, anyways, I'm just going to put the mic here and it's going to sound great. And that's the way pretty much the rest of the day went. Yeah, it's a pretty fun shoot.
Interesting. Yeah. You also had something on there. You'd worked with Al Gore.
Yeah. So that was for a digital piece on climate. But yeah, the production company set this up. He was promoting his second documentary. And so he was giving out interviews, but the time, window frames were really, really tight and very specific. So we would, we rolled up to set, and there the PR person would come out, and she told us that we had something. She's like, you have from 105 to 122 to finish this. And then she turns to me and she says, you have 30 seconds to mic former Vice President Gore. I was like, 30 seconds? Okay. So, I was really nervous for that shoot. And I remember I had 2 sets of wires ready to go. So if one receiver and transmitter had problems, I would just flip on the other one. And even though I was only getting paid for one, I was just really nervous. But it went really well. He's a really, really nice guy. Very used to being mic'd up, and it was a real honor to meet that guy.
All right. Now, you also did something with Property Brothers?
Oh, that was with Leslie Jones from Saturday Night Live. I think they're doing this celebrity season. So yeah, I was doing a day with Leslie Jones doing her apartment. I can't say too much about it. I could sign an NDA, but essentially we just, we shot Property Brothers stuff of, remodeling, and then us going around town looking at furniture. She's a great lady. She's super fun. I liked working with her a lot.
So the Property Brothers were a part of that?
I don't think they were there that day. They were having the talent and then the contractors and then someone else walk around town with her. I can't remember who it was, but they weren't there that day.
Okay. So you just primarily had to mic her up and follow her?
Yeah, it was her, the contractor, and I think her assistant. Yeah, and then just kind of swing a boom around and catch, weird stuff. That was a good one.
All right. Now, besides doing location sound, you also do some work at Paramount doing post-audio work for TV Land and Comedy Central. So tell us a little bit about some of the shows that you're working on.
Over there, I'll sub in for the main mixer when there's just too much work or he has to leave. So it's a lot of just turning around spots, and I'm not sure what the term for them is, but they're kind of 2 to 4 minute, a little more in-depth pieces on some of the shows where they'll interview cast members and stuff. we'll do that, and then people will need VOs for Comedy Central or whatever, whichever floor is a little busy. So they'll send them down to the VO booth, and we'll do some stuff like that. But man, those turnarounds are pretty tight. Like coming from the post world, I gotta say, if you really want to get your editing chops, go work in television. They want that stuff insanely fast. Like you're really crashing through it. A lot of stuff goes digital now. It's not an excuse to make a poor mix, but it's the earbuds are pretty forgiving. Let's put it that way.
I tell you, when I first switched over and started doing more promo work, we would do, I think one day I counted, we did 17 voiceover sessions in one day. And the session would last, 2 minutes. And these professional, voice guys come in and they would read it once. And he said, "Can we do it one more time for a safety?" And they'd go, "Why?"
That's amazing.
"Just one more, would you please?" But all the good old days.
Yeah, now they want to do, God, they'll do so many takes of, just something that sounded good the first time. Like, I don't know how many different ways we can read that.
Yeah. So, all right. Now, you weren't always in the audio field, so tell us about your other career.
Yeah. So before sound, I was a chef for about a decade, and I moved out from the Bay to New York because I had my first chef gig out here. I was running a country club upstate, and something happened. I did the season, and I was like, God, I don't know if this is right anymore. So I had met my girlfriend at the time. She was living in New York, so I moved down there. I sous chefed around the city for a little bit, and I think I had completely burned out. I was like, this really isn't for me. So I took some time off to rethink about what I wanted to do, and I talked with one of my wife's friends who was a ADR mixer for the show called House. I don't know if anyone remembers that. And she was talking about sound, and I was like, oh, sound, that's interesting. So I looked into that, and I remember there were kind of two paths I saw. I could either go onto the picture side or the sound side, and I kind of gravitated towards sound because they felt like the underdogs, and I always liked the underdogs. So yeah, I investigated sound and apprenticed at a studio, and whatever it is now, 7 years later now, I'm still doing it.
Interesting. And I guess you'd mentioned somewhere that you said audio is a lot like the culinary industry.
Yeah, definitely. So in the kitchen, it's very structured. The hierarchy is structured, and they adhere to that very, very tightly. And I feel like it's just, same on set. You have the director that is like the chef, the AD is your sous. You have camera, picture, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of the prep work. It feels the same too. It's like you're preparing very deeply for this one moment, which is what you do in a dinner service or something. So you're doing, backup cables, redundancies, this and that, and then you work towards this one moment, and then you capture it, and then you kind of refine it. You refine that raw material into something beautiful. And I feel like there's a very, very similar workflow in the kitchen.
That's a cool comparison. I like that.
There's also a lot of kind of hazing and machismo in the kitchen, like how long and how hard you can work. I think that culture is going away from the production industry, but some of that culture is still kind of there too. I can kind of feel it.
All right. So out of all the projects you've worked on, audio wise, what's been your most favorite?
My favorite one? There was this anti-bullying PSA that I really liked. The cast was really funny, and it was, it was for a good cause that I thought was important. And it's nice to be able to connect with a work that, you like as well, like you believe in. And so I don't know if that was my favorite, but that's the first one that comes to mind for sure.
Well, so what was the setup for something like that?
So we went into a high school, and the story was something about like some guy during the Renaissance period who has no idea that he's time traveled to this period where people are nice, and he's just a complete jerk to everyone, and he walks around. So it's like Amadeus walking the halls of a high school being mean to kids and showing why this is just so outdated. And it was fun. Yeah.
All right. What was the technical setup?
Oh, that was pretty straightforward. It was just a boom and a lav, but we had to thread the lav through his hair wig because he had this, strange, I think it was like one of those like kind of poofy shirts up in the front. So it was impossible to get a lav in there. But so I worked with a wardrobe just to thread it through his hair, and it sounded great.
For somebody getting started, do you recommend renting gear or buying gear?
Well, the guy that mentored me in the studio, I thought he had a great philosophy, which was, he said, never buy gear unless the gig will pay for it. He just kind of always was very stern about not financing equipment. And the reasoning being, if you buy it and suddenly work just kind of slows down, you're under this tremendous pressure to pay off equipment that you really don't have money for. So I've tried to stick to that. And I just rented until I had a job that would pay for like my first 63 or my first whatever. So it was, it took a while to build up a kit. But I guess to answer that question, I rented until I could afford to buy. And I just bought in one shot. Like, I didn't want to finance it.
Okay. That's a good tip.
Everyone's situation is different, but I was really fortunate too. I was married at the time, so I could have my wife help me out as well. But I can imagine, expensive city like New York, it's hard to do. Sometimes you just have to finance it. There's just no other way to do it. Okay.
Well, what was your worst on-set experience?
So it was the second feature that I ever worked on. And the reason it was just a really tough gig was the DP was just an absolute nightmare to work with. And I'd only read about those things, like terrible DPs on JW Sound or other forums, but I never worked with a really difficult one. And this guy he'd just rip heads off. You ask him for a frame line, what do you think I'm doing? Like, this is terrible, go away. Oftentimes he would just leave without telling anyone. One time they actually rolled without sound. And then when we got there, they turned to me and they said, "Did you get that?" I said, "We were still walking up. Like, why?" So it was a really challenging shoot. We got all the audio that they wanted, but yeah, it was a really hard thing to do for, whatever it was, 30, 40 days.
Wow.
Yeah. Those are long days. But by contrast, working with a DP that is actually pretty nice, it's easy to work with, it's a complete opposite experience.
Yeah. You actually enjoy it.
Right. Like, oh, this is, it's fun to be creative and make good, fun stuff.
All right. So have you ever forgotten any gear when you were on your way to an audio gig?
I think I was pretty good in the beginning. I've actually forgotten more stuff as of late, but it's only because we'll talk about the gig and they'll say, "Oh, sit down, whatever." And I'll just leave my harness at home. And I did that once and they wanted to walk outside. And I was like, oh. So I just had to look very awkward so that they wouldn't think that I forgot my harness on purpose.
Holding it on your chest? Or?
Yeah. Like a bunch of books and trying to get this boom in the right position. It's kind of ridiculous. I did forget, a shock mount for the boom pole. And it was kind of a last minute gig. They said, "Hey, can you do a direct to camera?" I was like, "Oh, sure." So I took a really bare bones kit. When I got to set, I was putting the rig together and I couldn't find the shock mount. So I had to gaff tape it and just kind of hope nobody would notice.
Did it work out okay?
It did. I think that it's kind of nice that no one really pays attention to sound sometimes. They're like, "Oh, it looks fine. All right, let's go." You're like, okay. But most of the important pieces, I'm a little too paranoid to leave behind.
So what kind of expendables do you like to use?
Pretty much the same stuff. Transport, Joe Sticky. I like the Ursa stuff a lot. I've moved away from the kind of rubber mounts. So when I moved over to DPAs, they have these DPA concealers that are made out of hard plastic. And I found that works. I like that much better because with the rubber mounts, sometimes they'll catch or there's a little friction. But with smooth plastic, it's really lovely. And Ursa actually now they have the mini mounts for the DPAs, so it's a smaller profile, and I've been really liking that. And then just kind of the usual top stick stuff. Yeah.
Give us a rough idea of the range that, say, someone doing location sound in the New York City area could possibly make as a location sound mixer. You don't have to get real specific, but give us a rough idea.
This is a often hotly contested topic, like in the forums. I'm sure that you know, but I think it's fair as of 2019 as a range for non-union work that's not commercial work to be anywhere from like 6 to 650, 675 for 10. And then for your kit, I charge 150 for my mixer, 85 a wire, 50 for boxes, 85 for a scratch, and then 50 for booms. And then whatever else, we'll just do a la carte. So it's anywhere from like 350 to 4 for a basic kit.
If you could go back, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and give yourself a tip, what would you say?
So much, man. So much. I would tell my former self, do the apprenticeship for a sound mixer. I think that if I could do that again, I would definitely try and find someone in the field and try to apprentice under them. I think that's a more solid, thorough way to come up in the field. And the other part would just be that this stuff takes time. There's no to do it right. It just takes time. It takes time to build your kit, to build a network, to have people know who you are and kind of establish a foundation for yourself. Because in the beginning, it just feels like it's not moving fast enough. Like there's not enough work. I'm not getting enough experience, and it just takes time. That's what I would tell myself.
Now, how does it work when it comes to, say, compensation, say in New York? When you're working with a company that maybe you haven't worked with before, do you try to get a deposit or 50% up front or anything like that?
Yeah. So as of August of last year or September, I just started asking for a 50% deposit of the entire invoice from new clients. My older clients are fine because they'll pay and we just kind of know each other. We have a relationship. But new clients, I think that it takes a little bit of the edge off. I haven't had any pushback yet. It's always surprising what is possible if you just ask. Like, man, I should have been asking this a long time ago.
I remember I was on a gig. I think it was one of my first freelance gigs, and I was talking to, I think it was the DP, and he was like, "What, you didn't get a deposit up front?" I'm like, no." So I learned my lesson. I started asking for a deposit. How has the business kind of changed since you got into audio?
I mean, I'll be totally honest. I got in, really into production sound maybe in 2014. So in 4 years, from that short time span, it's really just been a learning process for me. But I did start from like a Tascam 580. I think that's what it's called. Actually, I was a Tascam DR60. It was a 2-channel. And then I moved to a 580 and I ran that until I couldn't take it any further. Just luckily had a gig that would pay for a 633. So that was like my big serious purchase. And I was so excited. I was like, oh man, I totally see why people pay for a sound devices or a Zaxcom. None of those kind of lingering doubts in my mind, like, oh God, what if the battery cable gets a little wonky? It's going to pull out and shut down again. None of that stuff. A lot of those concerns are allayed with professional gear. So that was a really nice feeling.
You're using Zaxcom. Had you used any other brands before?
Yeah. So I think like a lot of us, I started on G3s and then I moved to Electros. I was on 411s for a long time. I was toying with Zaxcom. I liked, it just seemed very technical every time I tried to get into it. And I didn't like that part. And then I was on a gig that they needed the possibility to have the talent go away, but continue to record out of range. So I took a Zaxcom set for a test spin and I really liked it. I was like, okay, it's worth it the time to figure this out. So I moved all from Electro to Zaxcom.
And it really was a big difference?
In terms of workflow and what I'm able to do just from my bag, yeah. So with the Electro set, there's that Dweedle tone, and that's kind of the only way to adjust parameters once you've mic'd someone up. And then if you have to do it with multiple wires in the field, it's time consuming. Sometimes the Dweedle sound, carries over and you unintentionally change it. But with Zaxcom, I can control every transmitter parameter from my bag, and it's really nice. Yeah, you can sleep. You can put transmitters to sleep, change volume, frequency, send them to record, to stop. It's really flexible.
I'm trying to decide what to do next. So
if you're wideband now, it's something to look at. The Electro set is really, I still like Electros too. They sound great. If it looks like it's going to be a rough shoot, I'll rent some Electros, some SMQVs or something. It's interesting if you rent a set of receivers and a transmitter. You're like, oh, look, for my bag, I'm just going to turn you off and you send a little coil, bump you up a little bit. It's pretty nice. The PDR function on the Electros?
Yes.
So they have a similar function on Zaxcom where you can record to the transmitter, and it's another way to back yourself up. I'm not proud to say this, but I have had scenarios where the micro SD card has saved my butt. So it's a nice kind of, insurance policy in my mind to have too.
All right. Well, Gene, as we kind of start to wrap things up, do you have any final words of wisdom that you could tell people out there what to watch out for, what not to do, what to do?
There's a cook a long time ago, and he told me, it doesn't matter if you're like the best chef in the world. If you're a jerk, no one's going to want to work with you. So it's never, the person with the most technical knowledge or the most cooking experience, but there's a lot of other things that go into getting hired. And that always stuck with me.
That's good. I like that. What's the best way for people to reach out and get in touch with you?
Same way as probably everyone. I got a website. It's 829prdx.com. And it's got my email address and my phone number. And yeah, that's probably the best way.
All right. Well, Gene, I want to say thanks for being on the podcast today. We appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. This was a blast.
And a big thanks to all of our listeners out there. If you'd like us to discuss a particular topic, please send us an email at locationsoundpodcast@gmail.com. We would love for you to subscribe and leave us a comment. We're available on Apple Podcast, and for Android users, check out Google Podcast. Also, we're on Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, and on your favorite podcast app. Until next time, remember, sound is half the picture.